Hello and welcome to News Central TV. I'm Darshan Usman. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin the news in America, where former President of the United States, Donald Trump, has described his successor, Joe Biden, as the worst president in the history of the country. Trump stated this as he arrived in court to face a contempt of court hearing as part of his historic criminal trial.
What's going on is a disgrace to our country, and it's all Biden's fault, and everybody knows it. He's got no message. He's got no compassion. He doesn't know what he's doing. He can't put two sentences together, frankly. He is the worst president in the history of our country. And again, what's going on is a disgrace. But it all starts with Joe Biden. The signals he puts out are so bad. And I can tell you, he's no friend of Israel, that's for sure. And he's no friend of the Arab world either. He doesn't know what to do. He wants to take like a middle ground, and oftentimes that doesn't work, but it's certainly not working here. But what he's done to Israel is abandon them. And he's trying to be as nice as he can to the other side. Call it the Arab world, but that's not working either because they get him. And he's an incompetent man. A peace will never happen with a guy.
Meanwhile, prosecutors on Tuesday accused Donald Trump of brazenly and repeatedly violating a gag order imposed by the judge presiding over his hush money trial to prevent him from intimidating witnesses. Trump, 77, is charged with falsifying business records to buy the silence of porn star Stormy Daniels over a 2006 sexual encounter that could have impacted his 2016 presidential bid. Judge Juan Merchan interrupted testimony at the trial to hold a hearing to determine whether Trump, who is seeking to recapture the White House in November, should be in contempt of court for violating his gag order. Prosecutor Chris Conroy told the judge that Trump's willful and intentional attacks on witnesses clearly violates the gag order and urged him to fine the real estate tycoon $1,000 for each violation. For more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Afia Hagen. Hello, Afia. Now, this gag order is hanging over the whole trial. What has been Trump's reaction to the accusation of him willfully violating it?
Well, you're absolutely right. This gag order was brought up right at the beginning of today's proceedings, and it basically prevents Donald Trump from talking about any parts of the case in the media or on social media, which is done on his own social media platform. He's been talking about jurors, talking about prosecutors, and basically the judge wants to prevent him from doing that, and that could be by fining him $1,000 for each time that happens. Now, Donald Trump has hit out at the gag order and said that it's a disgrace and he's annoyed by having to sit back whilst other people talk about me. He said he's not allowed to defend himself. He's also complaining that he can't campaign for the election because he's trapped in a freezing courtroom all day long. So this gag order is really, really important. Donald Trump shouldn't be making statements about jurors or witnesses, which he has been doing continuously. And so that's being considered alongside this case, and it could result in him being fined or even by the judge saying, look, we're going to throw you in jail for one night for you to learn your lesson. That's something that could be tabled also.
All right, Afia, now we started hearing from David Pecker yesterday, and he continued giving his statement today. Who is David Pecker, and why is his statement so significant in this case?
David Pecker is someone who's really, really pivotal to this case. So he was the CEO of American Media Incorporated, and they basically published the National Enquirer in the period leading up to the 2016 election. Now, the National Enquirer is a tabloid magazine-style newspaper that is in the United States, and they're very, very well known for their salacious stories. So prosecutors have claimed that in August 2015, Pecker met with Donald Trump and his then personal fixer, who was Michael Cohen, at Trump Tower in Manhattan, and basically discussed the option of using the tabloids to suppress any negative stories about Donald Trump and promote any positive ones. This is known as catch and kill, where basically you buy a negative story with the intention of publishing it and bury it and never publishing it at all. One instance of this was porn star Stormy Daniels and her story that she'd had sex with Donald Trump, for which she claims that it's been claimed that he paid hush money to her for her not to reveal the story. There was also another story about a doorman at the Trump Towers Hotel who claimed that he had a story that Donald Trump had fathered a love child with a housekeeper at Trump Towers. Now, this particular worker at the hotel contacted Michael Cohen, and Pecker contacted Michael Cohen as well from the National Enquirer. When he got wind of the story, they paid the man off $30,000 for this story, but never published it. Now, Pecker said he found out that the story wasn't true, 1,000% false, and that's why he didn't publish it. But it's thought that this is an example of a catch and kill story that was used to keep negative stories of Donald Trump out of the press in the lead up to the election in town, and then to boost positive stories about him instead.
All right, now, Afia, we heard from Trump yesterday, and we did hear from him today as well. What are your thoughts on the trajectory of this case?
Well, this is a long case. You know, we're in for a long few weeks seeing all the twists and turns of what happened. There's 34 counts of fraud in this case that we're going to hear about. At the end of today's proceedings, we heard from Donald Trump as well. You're absolutely correct in saying we heard from him going into court yesterday and today. At the end of the day, he's complaining about the gag order. He said it's unconstitutional. He said he's not allowed to defend himself and other people are allowed to say whatever they want about me, and it's very, very unfair. We can expect more of this, more of the same, more of Donald Trump making statements at the beginning and the end of the court day, probably still talking on social media, and more salacious details like what we heard from David Pecker about catch and kill stories, the different ways in which it's being implied that Donald Trump tried to manipulate the workings of things, his reputation, you know, paying off people in the run up to the 2016 election. Now, we also have to say that Donald Trump, of course, has denied all these allegations, but we are in for a long run with this case. Remember, this is only one of a few legal cases that Donald Trump has in court, so it is certainly going to be a long few weeks.
Absolutely, Afia Hagen. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, still in North America, the fourth meeting to reach a global agreement on plastic trash has started in Ottawa. Now, during the opening plenary session, Canadian Environment Minister Stephen Gilbert called for a new global consensus that ends the costly, inefficient and harmful waste of plastics.
Let's join hands and work together to deliver something extraordinary. New hope, effective action for the planet and for our peoples.
We can be proud of what we have achieved, but a job half done is a job not done. Time is against us, both in terms of finalizing the instrument, but also how much more the planet can take.
We're here today because we recognize that we must throw away this throwaway generation. We need to forge a new global consensus that ends the costly, inefficient, and harmful waste.
In the Caribbean, gang violence in Haiti that has ripped through Port-au-Prince has forced hundreds to flee their homes. Since the crisis erupted in late February, the population has nowhere else to go. Fedelin Edward, a 38-year-old mother, says she has been living in fear, sheltering on the roof of the Ministry of Communications.
Mais dit bah nous censé rester dans fitière lui l'école qui doit parler nous pas calculer parce que chaque jour de tirer doit qui vient avant la vaille nous obligé de mettre câble dans son caoutchouc parce que doit monter mais c'est dans bassin l'eau aller à dire le bassin en plein l'eau a venir que là pas descendre parce que la pluie a venu à force il vient mal aller ça n'a pour fur et à mesure
Let's go on a short break now. More stories when we return. Please stay with us. We continue the news with updates from the Middle East conflict, where the Israel-Hamas war entered its 200th day on Tuesday, with fears mounting of an Israeli invasion in the overcrowded south of the besieged Gaza Strip amid calls for hostages to be freed. The Israeli army carried out intense shelling overnight of Gaza City, with the military saying it also struck Hamas positions in South Gaza. Shelling and loud explosions were heard in southwest Gaza and the city of Khan Yunis in the south, while airstrikes struck near the Beruj refugee camp and artillery fire hit the Nusrat refugee camp. The war erupted when Palestinian militants poured across the border with Israel on October 7th in an unprecedented Hamas-led attack that resulted in the deaths of 1,170 people. About 250 people were abducted during the Hamas attack. Israel estimates that 129 captives remain in Gaza, including 34 who the military say are dead. Let's also tell you that under a ceaseless storm of strikes in Gaza, a baby girl has survived insurmountable odds as the only member of her family left alive after she was delivered by cesarean section as her mother lay dying. Now, at just 7 months pregnant, her mother, Sabrin Al-Sakani, reached the emergency unit in critical condition after she was fatally wounded in the head and abdomen at the weekend. According to eyewitnesses, an Israeli airstrike hit her family house in the east of the southern Gaza city of Rafah, killing 19 people.
تم استخراج الطفل من بطن امه بعمليه قيصريه. طبعا فقدنا والدته ووالده واستشهدوا كل افراد عائلته. هو ما زال على قيد الحياه، وان شاء الله نامل من الله عز وجل يعني بالمتابعه وبالعلاجات وباجهزه التنفس الصناعي انه يضل على قيد الحياه. والله وضعه الصحي لسه ما زال على جهاز يعني مش تنفس صناعي كامل، ولكن هو بنسميه جهاز السباب. لسه نفسه تعبان، ويعني مراقبة حالته الصحية ووضعه الصحي موجود عندنا، لكن لسه لم يستقر وضعه. الكادر الطبي وصل لدرجة الإنهاك بعد 200 يوم أو 7 شهور، داخلين في الشهر الثامن. إنهاك يعني بشكل مستمر، وعدد الحالات كبير جدا جدا، بما أنه محافظة أو مدينة رفح يعني فيها أكثر من 100 أو من مليون.
In the meantime, the UN has called for an international investigation into reports of mass graves at 2 Gaza hospitals destroyed in Israeli sieges, saying war crimes may have been committed. The United Nations Rights Office said it was horrified by the destruction of Gaza's biggest hospital, Al-Shifa in Gaza City, and its second largest, the Nasser Medical Complex in Khan Yunis. On Monday, the Palestinian Territory Civil Defense Agency said health workers had uncovered more than 200 bodies of people killed and buried at Nasser Hospital, which was besieged by Israeli troops last month. The UN Rights Office demanded independent, effective, and transparent investigations into the deaths.
Every 10 minutes, a child is killed or wounded. I'll let you calculate how many children must have been killed or wounded since this briefing began today. They are protected under the laws of war, and yet they are the ones who are disproportionately paying the ultimate price in the war. But the latest images of a premature child who was taken from the womb of her dying mother, of the adjacent 2 houses where 15 children and 5 women were killed, this is beyond warfare. In relation to Al-Nasser, the Gaza government media office announced that 283 bodies were recovered, of which 42 have been identified. Victims had reportedly been buried deep in the ground and covered with waste.
Still on the conflict, Qatar's foreign ministry spokesman, Majid Mohammed Al-Ansari, has slammed Israeli officials for their lies about Qatar and its role as a mediator in the Israel-Hamas war. Majid al-Ansari also said that Hamas's political leadership will stay in Doha as long as their presence remains beneficial to mediation efforts aimed at ending the war in Gaza.
لسان عدد من المسؤولين الإسرائيليين من بينهم وزراء في حكومة نتنياهو الذين تحدثوا بشكل سلبي عن دور الوساطة القطرية، وهؤلاء يعلمون جميعا ما هو الدور القطري، طبيعته وتفاصيله خلال المرحلة السابقة، واختلاق أكاذيب حول هذا الدور من باب فقط التموضع السياسي لهؤلاء الأشخاص في إطار الدورة الانتخابية في بلادهم، لا يبرر بأي شكل من as we said, we are reassessing our role as mediators, but any decisions regarding this issue will not be taken unless we are finished with that reassessment and we are ready to convey the results of this reassessment. But
we now head to Europe, where the Pas-de-Calais Channel experienced a new tragedy on Tuesday with the death of 5 migrants, including a 7-year-old girl, off the coast of Wimereux while they were trying to head to the United Kingdom. Now, the prefect of the district, Jacques Billion, said in addition to the girl, 3 men and a woman are among the victims. This new tragedy, which brings to at least 15 the number of migrants who died in 2024 in crossing attempts, takes place a few hours after the adoption by the British Parliament of a controversial law allowing the expulsion of asylum seekers to Rwanda.
Dans un bateau, un nouveau drame est survenu dans un bateau surchargé de migrants tôt ce matin vers 5 heures au large de Wimereux, avec des conséquences très lourdes puisqu'on déplore le décès de 5 personnes, une fillette de 7 ans, une femme et 3 hommes. Le bateau a pris la mer depuis la plage des Allemands à Wimereux avec 112 personnes à bord, c'est du jamais vu. À quelques centaines de mètres de la côte, le moteur s'est stoppé et plusieurs personnes...
French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal has expressed his desire to put the artificial intelligence developed in France at the service of the French people during a visit to the zoo in the southern suburbs of Paris. Now, Attal made the trip after bringing together around 15 ministers in Matignon for an 8th interministerial committee of the civil service. He said to write responses to the 16 million annual online requests, the tax administration will deploy a 100% French AI named Albert, designed by the Interministerial Digital Department. Likewise, 4,000 environmental projects submitted each year to regional environmental directorates will now be pre-instructed by an AI, such as wind farm or urban development projects.
Peut-être pas, mais depuis quelques mois, une révolution à bas bruit s'opère dans notre État, c'est la révolution de l'intelligence artificielle. Aujourd'hui, je vous annonce que nous avons développé une IA souveraine, française, qui va révolutionner nos services publics et que nous mettons désormais au service des Français. Alors, laissez-moi vous raconter rapidement l'histoire de cette IA à la française.
Belgium has opened a new forensic drug center called the National Institute of Criminalistics and Criminology. The center is meant to help police, customs and judges in their fight against drug trafficking. Spokeswoman for the Brussels Prosecutor's Office, Ine van Wermich, said the center will allow the country have a very clear image of the products circulating on its territory.
Oui, on fait des progrès parce qu'on a beaucoup investi dans la criminalité liée à la drogue, mais je me rends compte, chaque cas de violence est un cas de trop. Il faut lutter avec beaucoup de conviction contre ça, mais c'est ce qu'on fait avec les policiers, avec nos magistrats, lutter contre la mafia de drogue. Dans le dossier Sky, ici, on a déjà pu condamner plus de 1000 personnes. L'année passée, on a pu saisir 116 tonnes de cocaïne. On fait une lutte très acharnée.
Meanwhile, far-right AFD party co-leader Tino Tripala has reacted after an aide to Maximilian Krah, a German far-right member of the European Parliament, was arrested on suspicion of spying for China, deepening concerns about foreign interference ahead of June's European elections. Tripala, during a presser in Berlin, said the situation is concerning. Federal prosecutors said in a statement that the suspect, identified only as Jean Go, stands accused of sharing a European Parliament information with a Chinese intelligence service and of spying on Chinese opposition figures in Germany, an allegation that has sparked an angry reaction from Beijing. Go is a German national who has reportedly worked as an aide to Krah in Brussels since 2019.
Beunruhigend an, wenn natürlich ein Mitarbeiter hier festgenommen wurde. Der Generalbundesanwalt ermittelt, beziehungsweise hat aber auch dazu noch keine Stellung bezogen. Auch das gilt es erstmal abzuwarten. Wie gesagt, nichtsdestotrotz, Herr Krah ist auf dem Weg nach Berlin und wir werden mit ihm gemeinsam weitere Schritte beraten und auch besprechen.
In Asia, more than 100,000 people have been evacuated due to heavy rain and fatal floods in southern China, with the government issuing its highest level rainstorm warning for the affected area on Tuesday. The floods have claimed the lives of 4 people. Torrential rains have lashed Guangdong province in recent days, swelling rivers and raising fears of severe flooding that state media said could be of the sort of only seen around once a century. The Meteorological Observatory of Shenzhen said the city was among the areas experiencing heavy to very heavy downpours, adding the risk of flash floods was very high. It later downgraded its weather warning as the storms weakened, but urged residents to remain vigilant against disasters. And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. Do follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I'm Darshan Usman.